Absolutely. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar session on the upcoming Maryland Paid Family and Medical Leave. Before we get started, I'll run through a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, and we will share the recording and presentation materials following the webinar. For the purpose of this session, all participants are in listen-only mode. We do encourage questions throughout the session. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We will address as many questions as we can throughout the session and also during the Q&A portion at the end. Today's session is general information around Maryland's paid family medical leave insurance and things employers should be thinking about and doing in preparation. Content should not be considered legal or tax advice. If you have specific legal or tax questions, please consult your counsel for those specific scenarios. But we will answer some questions as best as we can generally. And overall, this session is designed to help you better understand the upcoming Maryland Paid Family Medical Leave Program, key timelines, things employers should be considering and thinking about now as this implementation continues on. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And with that, we'll go ahead and get it started. And we'll start with a polling question. Helps us get some general information about our audience. So our first question is Maryland your first mandated paid family medical leave state for your employee base?
So the good news is there's the majority of people say that it is not their first. So that's good news. We did have a lot of people who signed up that said that they really don't know very much about Maryland's Family Leave Act, that it's been delayed a couple of times, so they really wanted to know more. And that's kind of where we're going to start today. Now, my name is Gina Rutledge, and I am a member of the DBL Center, specifically focused on paid family and medical leave states, the statutory states. I've got over 28 years in insurance, and the last decade has pretty much been focused on statutory disability and paid family and medical leaves. And I come from a family that had a small business growing up in the Midwest. So every time I read one of these statutes, I really think about my parents and how they would have adapted to these employment laws as a small business owner. Sonia, would you like to share a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Your presenters today are myself and Gina Rutledge. Gina gave her background. So I've got about 30 years in employee benefits. For the last 18 years, I've been heavily focused in the mandated states, in the originators, New York and New Jersey, primarily California, Rhode Island, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii. In 2018, Massachusetts was the first state to pass and roll out an ever-encompassing paid family medical leave program. Both Gina and I were integrally involved in the states that have rolled these out: Oregon, Colorado, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Delaware, Minnesota. Now with Virginia passing and Maryland passed, those are the two newest states to roll it in. So we come with a lot of experience. We've seen a lot of things happen. Every state passes their own paid family medical leave program. I kind of refer to it like a paid family medical leave bicycle. Everyone builds it a little bit different, but ultimately in the end, the purpose is to provide job protected paid time away while an employee needs to care for themselves or a family member. So topics for today's discussion. a little PFML landscape and why now, some basics of the Maryland Family Program, important employer actions that are upcoming, coverage plan options, and what employers should be doing now, what they should be talking about, thinking about, how they should be preparing for the go live of the contributions for 2027 and then the benefit claims in 2028. Gina and I have created a really great employer guide that kind of takes you through the upcoming quarters about things employers can do to prepare, think about, kind of a checklist per se. And we've done our best to put it chronologically. So if you get any questions on paid family medical leave, if you have specific situations, concerns, please reach out. We encourage you to reach out to your insurance partner, your insurance broker, and generally our function is to work with insurance brokers to assist them in providing the best possible service, solutions, expertise, and experience back to their clients. So again, if you have any questions, please reach out to your insurance professional.
Yep. Now, what we'd like to do now is ask about priority, because this is going to help us. What do you want to see us talk about today? Is it the cost of the program? Is it claim administration, or is it really your actions as an employer under the law? If you take that poll, then as we walk through the slides, we're going to be able to really focus on what you want to know today, being an audience member. So, what are your thoughts? Where do you want us to focus today? We want this time to be valuable for you. All right. Employer actions under the law seems to be taking a really big leeway. All right. And then the cost of the program. All right. We're going to get started. All right. So the first thing, I think the state's been doing a lot of presentations, like every month they're doing something, and they're letting people know that their first action is going to be in September, right? They're going to have to register with the state. And that registration is going to be for every single tax ID number. That's how they're tracking each business, is by a tax ID number that has workers in the state. All right. So doesn't matter if maybe you've got one company, you got 3 locations, and each location has a different tax ID number. The state is looking at that tax ID number as being a separate business. So you may have to register 3 different times. All right. Now, when you do register, the state's going to automatically include you in the state's public plan. All right. So that's where family comes in. It's the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Plan. But what many people don't recognize is that employers have a choice. There is a choice called a private plan. It's going to be a declaration of intent to use a private plan. And there's a small window of opportunity to use that. And all that means is that you're going to comply with the law, but you're going to use an insurance policy, or you're going to self-fund a plan instead of defaulting into the state's program. Now, what is a DOI? It is a one-time only offer, right? And it's only going to be available September 1st through November 15th, which is why we're talking to you today, right? It is going to be like an official document or an official promise to the state that I am going to use a private plan, and that will give you a contribution exemption. So you will not need to pay into the state at all in 2027, which is that pre-funding period, right? So the state is going to start collecting these contributions so they can build up a trust fund, and that trust fund is going to be used to physically pay benefits in 2028. All right. So what Sonia and I can do from our perspective with the DBL Center is we have a suite of insurance carriers that we shop around business, and we make sure that each client gets a really good rate, because sometimes the private plan rates can be better than the state rate. Sometimes the state rate is cheaper. So we look at what is important to a client to find out claim administration, those different things, and if a private plan is the right choice for them, right? Because it could be more than just cost. But right now, when we're looking at cost, this is really important for employers, especially those who have fiscal year obligations, right? So if you're trying to get your budget aligned for a fiscal year and July 1 is it, then you need to know that this new contribution is going to start January 1. And the state says no matter what, every employer, they want to have this account set up so that these contributions can be put in. And if you have a DOI and if you have that declaration of intent approved by the state, then the employer keeps that money. It's kind of like a safety deposit because they want you to go private. And if a decision is made where you're not going to go private, you've got that money in escrow, right? But what does that look like? Well, 0.9% of covered wages can add up to be quite a bit of money. Um, if you've got a $25 million covered payroll, that's $225,000 that the state is going to collect from you in these contributions. So that's why it's important to make an educated decision and look to see if this is something that you want to do. Is look at a private plan, which could potentially have that a contribution exemption with the promise that you're going to have that private plan going into 2028. Or is this something that you want to do to make sure that you've got the right finances set up for your fiscal budget or for your regular calendar budget? So now, what are the basics, right? Well, Maryland Family is a social insurance benefit. All right. It's not an employer sponsored benefit. It's a social insurance benefit. It's going to be available for every single worker in the state. And for that reason, right, it's going to follow the employee. It's not going to follow the employer. And the state is setting it up like an insurance plan. And if you think about it, there's workers' compensation insurance, unemployment insurance, and now you're going to have paid leave insurance, right? You're going to have the top three. And what does that give you? It gives that employee paid time away from work and job protections, right? Now, the benefits are going to begin, right, to be payable January 3rd of 2028. And that's why it's really important to break down the steps needed for employers because there are so many different nuggets that you can put in place between now and January of 2028 to help you be successful and compliant. All right. Now, employers, pretty much every private employer is going to be required, even those people with one remote worker in the state. All right, so that's why it's so important to get ahead of it and to know who your covered workers are, because as an employer, you're going to have to do this registration starting this fall. Right now, if you are a sole proprietor, a partner, an S corp, right, where the owner is maybe the only employee, the state is going to give you an option to opt into the program. But remember, it's a wage replacement benefit. So it's looking at employees and their W-2 wages. All right, so think about that when you're asking questions about will an owner be included? If that owner is actually someone who gets a W-2 and is treated like a regular employee, they are already covered. Now, who's excluded? It's going to be the federal government, right? The federal government has their own employee benefit program, so they're normally excluded from state programs. But now, covered employees, right? This is where it is bigger than what you normally see in an employee sponsored program, right? So as a business, you may have short-term disability or life insurance or health insurance coverage. Well, guess what? With this state paid leave program, it's going to be full-time and part-time people. It's going to be anybody who works in the state. and think about it. Right now, you're sending quarterly reports in right now for unemployment. Look at those reports because that has your pool of people who are going to be qualified for this Maryland program. Excuse me. So there is something called localization rules. So if you have an employee who maybe works from home a couple of days a week and works in the office a couple of days a week, and you don't know which state rule would apply, then you'll want to review the localization rules maybe with your unemployment attorney because they can really help. You really want to select one work state because if you have one work state, then the employee knows, right? This is where I go for unemployment. This is where I go for paid leave. So again, yeses is if that employee is working in the state. Even if the employee is working remotely from their home office and their home office is in the state, they are covered. Who's not covered is someone who just works for a Maryland company. If none of their work is in the state of Maryland, then they're not covered under the law. So it's really important to understand where your people are working and then what jurisdiction the law applies to. Now, why? Why can people go out on leaves? These are very common, all right, which is good. So in our poll, we know that many people are familiar with state paid family and medical leaves. All right, so the number one reason people go out is still for their own serious health condition, and that is under the medical leave. Then you've got the caregiver leave. And I've listed the family members, right? It's more generous than the federal FMLA program, but it's not quite as generous as some of the other newer programs that you've seen. So you can care for that loved one who is a parent or an in-law, um, your children, grandparents, grandchildren, legal wards, different things like that. Parental leave is your bonding. All right. So recognize there are two different benefits, a medical leave for the physical act of giving birth, and then there is parental leave for bonding with that child. And then there's two categories for uniform service. One is the caregiver. So if your family member was sick or hurt because of their military duty, you have access to the benefit. And then there is that military exigency that kind of aligns to the federal FMLA, where you've got that family member that's being deployed or coming back from deployment. All right. So now this is really important. Again, social insurance benefit. So a person needs to qualify for all employment in the state to be able to take the benefit. But that is not payroll deductions, that the premium that is due is based on when they work with you. So you're going to take premiums based on that person working in the state. But the state says, guess what? A person who wants to take the benefit must at least work 680 hours in the prior year to be able to qualify to take that benefit. Now, durations. Durations is a little bit different, of course, unique to Maryland. The overall is 12 weeks within a 12-month period. All right, that's your benefit year. But if a person experiences bonding at the same time they have a medical, you could get up to an extra 12 weeks. All right. So now if I've adopted a child and I went for bonding and then I get hurt in a car accident, right, I could qualify for that extra 12 weeks. It doesn't have to be tied to childbirth and child bonding. But if you have a bonding leave, you also have a time for that medical leave within the same benefit year, you get that extra time. And then leave frequency, you're going to be able to take it either continuously, the same way you do like short-term disability, or it can be taken in intermittent, which are those smaller increments of time, but they're looking at it a minimum of 4 hours. So you can take half a day if you work 8 hours. Okay. Now, the pay, like how much will someone get paid? We have to remember there is a difference between base pay and what the state considers an employee's average weekly wage. because that average weekly wage is going to include bonuses and overtime. And it's really going to look back and see, what does that paycheck say? And they're going to calculate an average weekly wage based on that actual money paid out through payroll, not base wages. All right. But the goal is to get more money into an employee's paycheck so that they can take the benefit. So those lower wage earners can get 90% of their benefit of their wages replaced. All right. So think about part-time people. Don't just think about people who make minimum wage. Really think about your part-time workers. They're actually going to be able to take a leave and qualify, and they're going to get quite a bit of money replaced. But now what that also means is, because the maximum weekly benefit is going to be $1,000 a week, you can look over at the other side, and the people who are paid around $80,000 a year, which is about $1,500 a week, they're going to get barely 65% of their wages replaced with the state benefit alone. So for that reason, really, we want you to talk to your insurance professional about your other benefit programs and see how they harmonize together. All right. Now, job protections, right? This is really important to recognize. There's two different types, right? There's that continuation of healthcare, right? So this person is still employed. They just have an approved leave of absence. So medical insurance, dental insurance, vision, any employer provided benefit that's considered under that healthcare will have to remain in force. All right, while that person is on an approved leave. The other thing is what we call job restoration. All right, so that's returning that person to the same or equal position. And Maryland does say that you can fire someone or terminate their employment for cause, but you really want to make sure that you talk to that employment attorney before you take any action, because you want to make sure you have the right documentation. You want to make sure that it is a substantial and grievous economic injury to have that person come back to you, right? So this is an emerging law, an emerging regulation, and it's a little bit unique to Maryland. So you want to make sure that you talk to your employment attorney about any type of documentation or thresholds that you want, because the state does allow termination under certain criteria. All right, employer actions. Everybody said this was important. All right, this is going to take time. All right, you have to know all the all the businesses that you have workers that roll up into a Maryland payroll. And the reason how come I say this is going to take time is because the state also asks you to designate an authorized person to register with the state, and that person has to have some type of authority. So it can be an owner, a partner, a president, someone from human resources, or that plant supervisor with legal authority to sign contracts for every single tax ID number. All right. And only that authorized officer will be able to do that registration. Now, they're doing this for your own protection, right? There are a lot of bad actors. There's a lot of AI out there. There's a lot of people pretenders. So the states, and this is common, right? You've seen it with other states, it's common because they really want to make sure that the person that is signing up with your tax IDs have authority to act on your behalf. That registration, we think, is going to kick in around September, because that is when that declaration of intent starts. Now, the state is also asking for employers, if they wanted to raise their hand and test out and be a pilot person to help with registration before it goes live. So if you want to do that, you can always contact the state and ask about being one of those early adopters and test out the registration process. But we know it's going to be open by September, because that, again, that declaration of intent to go private has a short window that starts September 1. So now what happens, right? You go in, you're able to register by each tax ID number, and it will have through that portal the option to apply for that declaration of intent. And there's still some details that are being worked out from the state. So we're going to ask you to stay tuned because closer to the time when that portal comes open, the state's going to release some additional information. And we're going to have another webinar to help walk you through what that would look like. But we do know, very important, lesson learned from other people, write down the link, write down your profile name, and write down your password. Because especially if you have like 2 or 3 different tax ID numbers, you want to make sure that you have all those accesses and you're able to link those together under one kind of like third party agreement so that one person would be able to manage your accounts afterwards, right? But only the officers are going to be able to do that. So please make sure, again, whenever you do this, write it down. It's very important. Now, it's also a requirement under the state law for employers to notify their workforce. All right, so the first one is going to be in December, and that's about a month before payroll deductions. Well, I'm here to tell you, if you have any kind of unions or collective bargaining agreements, or you're in one of those staffing agencies, you may want to contact them before December, right? December is the deadline, right? The end date, not the beginning date. But really, that is to try to help people understand that there is going to be a benefit program launched in the state. There will be a payroll deduction, or there's going to be contributions that are due. And eventually, you're going to have access to these benefits. All right. So that's going to be the next employer obligation, right? Is you register and then you make sure that your employees know what's happening. Okay. Then what's going to happen is you're going to have to put that notification in new hire handbooks, in your company handbook, right? You want to make sure that any brand new person who joins your team working in Maryland have access and they know this benefit's going to happen and they know that payroll deduction could be taken. Then fast forward to July, next summer. They really want every employee notified that this benefit program is happening, and they're going to give you more information. They're going to give, a poster. They're going to give that detailed template that we will follow so that every employee is aware that it's going to happen. And then annually, right, it's going to be the employer's responsibility annually to make sure employees recognize that this benefit is there. But then also, you will need to put in steps from, right, your people managers, your HR team, your plant managers, whoever is that person that an employee would go to say, I need time off. Whenever that Maryland person comes and says, I need time off, you may have to give this notice of rights to them, right? So these templates are being created. But just know that it's going to be there and it's going to be an employer's responsibility, not an insurance carrier and not the state, right? Because it's going to give that employee information that helps them know how to apply for benefits. So when you know they're going to be taking a leave, whether they ask for a claim or not, an employer is going to need to notify their employees of their rights under the law. All right, let's back up. All right, so we know family contributions are going to start with the first payroll run this January. So what you're going to want to do is understand now, is this something that as an employer, you want to fund the whole thing? Or do you need to be talking to your payroll department, your payroll vendor to say, okay, have you heard about this? Because I need to take off the payroll contributions under this new state law. All right. You're going to want to do that. And you're also going to be needing to set up a separate account. The state calls it a family escrow account. And what that means is that your money is going to be payroll deducted, and then any employer funds is going to be joining it. And it's going to be in that separate account that is different from any operation charges. All right. The state wants everybody to do that. All right. Even those who get on a DOI, the declaration of intent to go private. All right. Um, the rate is 0.9%, and it's going to be subject to the payroll cap, which is aligned with the Social Security wage base, and we won't know that until October. The employee can pay up to 45. I'm going to call it 45 cents, right? It's 45 cents every $100. They can contribute that. Now, if you're considering a private plan, what you're going to do is ask for a quote this summer. And that quote is going to say, okay, when you get an insurance policy that will start in 28, when the benefits kick in, this is how much our premium will be. And the employee can contribute. They just cannot pay more into a private plan than they would have paid into the state plan. All right. So employers, you're going to make some decisions here if you want to take that payroll deduction or if you're going to pay for it yourself. Definitely talk to a tax accountant or an attorney on your funding options because you know best how everything is set up. We don't. So talk with your experts so that you can discuss those planning options. Now, here's a little known secret, right? I mean, it's there, it's the process, but people forget about it. Next year, every single business is going to be required to do quarterly reports. Now, you do this today for unemployment. It's going to be a different report because I think this program needs a little bit more information about the hours worked since it is a leave. So you're not just worried about paid, but you're also looking for hours worked. So what's going to happen is first payroll in January, you're going to start taking that payroll deduction. And that money's going to go into that escrow account. So then in April, by April 1st, the first quarterly report is going to be due to the state. The state's going to then look and say, oh, this person does not have a declaration of intent on file, so it's going to owe contributions to the family trust. So it's going to kick out a contribution kind of statement that says, based on the payroll that you just submitted in this quarterly report, this is how much you owe us. All right. So what we've worked out here is that example. So, if you have 50 workers, you're putting that worker information in that quarterly report. It says that you got 1.25 million in that covered payroll. Well, it's going to be 1.25 million times by 0.9%. You're going to owe $11,000 or $11,250. All right. And then you're going to submit it by the end of the month. That's how every single state that has one of these programs bills, right? You self-report, do that quarterly report. It spits out a statement. All right. Private plans are very similar to this, right? They use the same covered payroll. So just recognize that it's the same covered payroll whether you go with the state or whether you use a private plan, because it's that same covered payroll that is used to actually calculate the benefit payment. All right. Now, coordination with other benefits. This is a big topic and one that if you start now looking at your employee handbooks, looking at what you have available, you're going to have time to figure out how to update your employee handbooks and manuals so that it coordinates well. So first of all, yes, what will coordinate with the paid leave in Maryland FMLA? Short-term disability. So the state leave pays first. Short-term disability is going to come in and supplement. And any other state or local leave laws like the sick leave law. But unique to Maryland is this something called a company benefit and alternative family purpose leave. So think of it as the biggest example, your paid parental leave, right? Your company has a paid parental leave. You can actually write in with your employment attorney how you expect an employee to use your company alternative family purpose leave for bonding at the same time that they use the state bonding benefit. All right, that is approvable, that is available under the law and regulations. Okay. Now, let's go over to the no column, right? No. Unemployment, you cannot have workers' comp or unemployment at the same time that you're having the Maryland paid leave, right? Now, if your employee is receiving like permanent partial disability, there are some constraints, but those are really kind of small instances where that employee can have both. So pretty much in general, no unemployment and no workers' comp at the same time as the paid leave program. But now in the middle, right, there's a maybe. And this is where you want to work with your employment attorney on what that maybe looks like, right? So you cannot force, not force, but if as an employer you choose to offer it, and if the employee chooses to take you up on that offer, then you are able to offer stuff like paid time off, sick leave, vacation time, to help top up. And I tell you why that could be really important. And that is if you've got an employee that's paying into their health insurance or their dental or, your retirement benefits, things like that. When they come back to work after a leave, they may owe all those back premiums. But if you can work it out where these top ups can help, right, that you're drawing down on the employee's accrued leave, right? You are making that offer, the employee is accepting that offer, you're deciding how many hours of paid time off the company plan will allow, then it's automatically taking out those payroll deductions, and that employee does not come back to work with a big bill over their head. And also, they don't come back with a big extra time bank of leave when you probably need that person at work. All right. So these coordination of benefits is going to take time and thought. So as you think through your participation and you're identifying who is there, you also want to identify your company benefits that could potentially overlap and which bucket they fall in, right? If it's based on an event, like you're adopting a child or you want to bond with a new baby, that could be under the alternative family purpose leave. But if you're talking about an accrued leave, like paid time off or vacation, right, that could be a maybe. That could be an employer's choice. Now, is short-term disability still needed? And I believe it is, because if an employee gets sick or hurt, they need money coming in to help them with their medical expenses. And sometimes 12 weeks isn't enough, especially when you look at the caregiving generation that we have, where both men and women are taking time off in those family leave reasons. Men are taking time off to bond with their new children. You've got men taking off time to care for their parents that are going through a serious health condition. You've got different things that are happening. So you want to make sure that you have that risk established for short-term disability to protect that employee. It really is important to consider if you've got higher wage earners that make more than like $80,000 a year or $1,500 a week, right? Because we know, right, the state benefit alone is not going to replace, but 65% of the benefit. Anything over that is going to be less than 65%. And the good news is most insurance companies will reduce your short-term disability rates because you're sharing risk with the state. Another question we get, and because I've got a lot of educated people here, we already know the federal FMLA and the state family programs are two different programs. So employers have to do both. Family does offer job protection and it will kick in much sooner. And it does have additional family members. So there will be times when an employee does qualify for Maryland when they don't yet qualify for federal. So you want to take extra care and make sure when that employee qualifies for both, they should both go at the same time. Now, coverage options, right? You're going to be automatically defaulted into the state program when you do that registration this fall. So the state law and regulations have this equivalent private insurance plan option, and they're calling it an EPIP. That's a unique name just for Maryland, but that's what it is. It's an equivalent plan. And you can either have private insurance or you could have a self-funded plan, that self-insured policy, and like have a third-party person do your claim administration. Right now, the state has a lot of extra protections and steps if it is self-funded because that employer is taking on a lot of the financial risk. So you do need a surety bond. And right now they're saying that 50 employees or more for that self-funded plan. Now, the difference is depends on what you want. If you want fast, easy, and compliant, the fully insured plan is yours, right? You've got to put money into that escrow account, but next summer, once the state approves the private plans, you get that money back. You can either give it back to the employees if you're taking payroll deductions, or if you, the employer, is funding it, you just put that money back into your operating fund, right? But the responsibility to stay compliant there and the fully insured is your insurance company. And they will be responsible for helping make sure that the claims and everything flow in that compliant mode. But now, if you like the employer flexibility, you want to have a little bit more control over your plan, it still has to meet every state guideline and then exceed where you want it to exceed. So you're going to need to work with an employment attorney to get that self-funded plan document ready because the state's going to want to see it. So if that's your path, you need to start working on it because you will need that in September when you apply for that private plan DOI. All right. Now, when you take those payroll deductions, if you're self-funding it, you will be able to keep that money because it can be used to pay benefits only. All right. So there are some additional financial structures that you'll want to set up. Most of you will do the fast and easy and compliant way and choose a fully insured insurance policy. But what can you potentially save? This is where you really want to make that educated decision. It needs to be more than just cost, but cost is a huge factor here. As you can see, private plans, there will be an application fee, and it's going to be based on your Maryland workforce count. All right. And it's going to be anywhere from like 250, to $1,000, honestly, depending on how big or how complicated your private plan can be. But if you've got 50 people, right, and your payroll is at, 2.5 million, you could potentially save $22,500 in contribution. So that $500 private plan application fee, you're still saving quite a bit of money. So we want you to be understanding of there is a cost, but look at what you're saving. The timeline is pretty straightforward, right? The state, there's a state law, and everyone follows that state law and regulations. So when the state opens up that registration, if you want to go private, there's going to be a little pathway where you could ask for that DOI, that declaration of intent to go private. In January, everybody's going to start with those contributions. If you got a private plan, those contributions can go into that escrow account. In April, the state's going to ask for everybody to send in those quarterly reports. If you are defaulted into the state plan, you're also going to have to pay those family premiums. If you got the DOI, you don't have to pay the premiums. In the summertime, that's when the private plan insurance policies are going to be ready, and the state's going to ask you to kind of like swap out your declaration for a real policy. And then the benefits are going to begin. So, I mean, there are these manageable steps. Now, what you can be doing right now. After this webinar, we are going to send you this checklist. And it just breaks down some steps into quarter tasks, as Sonia was saying. And just read it and see if it makes sense. And, you may have your own tasks or you may want to add stuff to it. And that's perfectly fine. Ours is just a template based on what is important under the state law and how you can chunk it up so you can be successful and compliant. State's also got a newsletter. You can sign up for that newsletter and you can get that so you can sign up for any of the presentations that they're giving or any updates that they're going to have because when that registration portal goes open, it's going to be open for everyone. Right? You want to really have that thoughtful conversation. Is a private plan right for you? So reach out to your insurance representative and start talking to them about a private plan for family insurance, probably paid family medical leave. Talk to them about what's going to happen with short-term disability or any other kind of employment benefits that you have. You want to look at your employee handbook. You also want to look at your call-in procedures, right? Because this is a leave of absence. So, what do you want your employees to know about how to ask for a leave? And what do you want your managers, your people managers to know about what to do when they, get asked to take a leave? And you really want to start outlining then your requirements for claim reporting, because then you can start to say, okay, I need this because I'm doing FMLA myself, so this is what I need. And will it blend in with this new state law? And please pay attention to any emails that you get from us at the DBL Center, because we're going to continue with a webinar series. In June, we're going to do one about is a private plan right for you? And talk about the different steps about the comparison between the state plan and a private plan. In August, we're looking to do one about registration. So how do you register? And then walk people through, because that's one of the things that Sonia and I can do, help your insurance professional, because we are experts with working with the states on these things. And then the next one would be in October to really help understand again your employer responsibilities going into 2027 and preparing for 2028. So we want to be that trusted advisor for you, that resource for you and your insurance professional. Right. So I did go through that information pretty fast, but I think we've had some questions come up. So um, I will toss it back to Sonia and we can walk through any of those questions.
Yeah, thank you. I've we had 5 questions and I've answered those all.
Oh,
Yep. So I don't currently have any open questions unless anyone's got any questions you want to pop in um, and ask, or if you've asked a question that was answered that you might want a little more detail on, since we do have a little bit of time left.
all right.
Yep.
Wow.
I think we're going to give everyone 10 minutes back.
Okay, so we got one last poll, and this is just going to help us improve our time, and because we do value you being here today. So let us know just what you think, if this was a good use of your time, and then any other topics that you want us to cover. We don't have to have a whole hour. We can have like a half an hour session specific to something that you find useful to help you and your insurance professional really be compliant and successful, right? That's the goal, right? Is to blend this in to what seems like a normal insurance policy that just happens to be tailored towards that employment law.
And do you want to give a little information, Gina, on our upcoming webinars that we're planning, like the topics?
Yeah,
I
so
know
I'm going
we've
to go
got,
back. Yep. Yep. So in June, right, we're going to follow up with is a private plan right for me? And we are going to look at some different nuances because maybe there's an industry that private insurance um, may have higher premiums, right? But they have higher premiums because claim administration could be more intense. So we want to talk about what does that look like? And then in August, it's that how do you register and walking through step by step because you could have more than one tax ID number that you're going to have to register. So we want to be there and have that. Your insurance professional is expert in so many other types of insurance that what we try to do at the DBL Center is add that specialist expertise because paid leave can be complex and they don't need to know everything. If they've partnered with us, we will share that information and we will help you do those registrations and help do those implementations with private insurance and really help coordinate those private plans to help keep you compliant and again, like really support any questions that you have about that coverage and working through those claims. In October, it's going to be that follow up with, as an employer, what do I need to do? What's right in front of me? What do I need to do to stay compliant? Have you registered? Have you registered everybody? Getting ready for your communication responsibilities. A lot of questions are going to come in because you're going to have payroll deductions taken out, but people can't take leave on the state program yet. So we want to prepare you in steps so that you feel successful.
Thanks.
All righty. Well, I tell you, yeah,
I haven't seen any new questions come in, so thank you again, everybody.
we appreciate your time and we hope you have a lovely holiday. And our thanks go out to anyone that was in the military that has served or has lost anyone in their military service. We are proud to be servicing you and thank you for your service. Have a good day, everyone.